On April 13th, 2000, we crossed the Torkham border from Pakistan into Afghanistan. From this point on, photographing or filming any living thing, human or otherwise, is forbidden. It was here that we broke this Taliban-imposed rule for the first time. The scars and wounds of the country are everywhere. Afghanistan has been at war for 20 years. It looks like the country has been ripped apart by a hurricane, the violence of which has never abated. "50 kilometers from the border, we came across the first poppy plantations. We shot these sequences in the Nangarhar district just a few hours after entering Afghanistan. We couldn't get good pictures from the roadside, so we risked our necks and went down into the fields to speak to the peasants. I don't know exactly when all this started. All I can say is that my grandfather himself used to grow poppy. I know that it's something wrong. The problem is that we don't have any other way to fill our stomachs. I am ready to accept any kind of alternative. I'm ready to destroy this field even today. Most of the poppy money never reaches the farmers. We sell it at the market. Many of the buyers are foreigners. We get around 1.8 to 4,000 Pakistani rupees per kilo. That's about 40 to 90 US dollars a kilo. Four months after the sowing of the poppy seeds, the capsules are ready to be lanced with a thin, homemade blade. The farmer squeezes each capsule with his fingers until it expels a milky white substance that solidifies and assumes a dark brown color the next day. This operation is repeated for a few days until the capsule is empty. The raw opium obtained in this way is called tor. Since the Taliban takeover in 1996, poppy fields have grown all over the country, and the total production is constantly on the rise. For decades, smuggling has been a common practice for the Pashtun tribes to which the Taliban belong and who live along the Pakistan-Afghanistan border. The Pashtuns are a traditionally warlike ethnic group who enjoy a large autonomy within the framework of the Pakistani constitution. In their tribal areas inside Pakistan, the old Pashtun code of honor, called Pashtunwali, overrides the federal laws. Milmastir, hospitality; Badal, the right to an equal revenge; and Nang, the pride of belonging to a brave tribe, are the main features of Pashtunwali. Even today, visitors are only allowed into the tribal areas if accompanied by a bodyguard carrying a gun. In the border villages close to the Khyber Pass, guns, drugs, as well as other smuggled goods are sold openly in the bazaars. Smuggling has been a common feature on the border since 1950, when the Pakistani government granted free trade and transit facilities to landlocked Afghanistan. The agreement is still in place and is called the Afghan Trade Transit Treaty. Goods entering Pakistan are taken to Afghanistan and in a few weeks are back on the border markets, where they're sold at competitive rates. It was only 9 o'clock in the evening by the time we arrived in Kabul, But already the streets were deserted. We later discovered there was an 8 p.m. to 6 a.m. curfew, which is strictly enforced. In the rest of the country, the curfew starts at 6 p.m. Foreign journalists in Kabul are obliged to stay at the Hotel Intercontinental and cannot go out alone. They must be accompanied by a driver and interpreter assigned by the Taliban. When we arrived, we were the only guests at the huge hotel. Kabul is a scene of total devastation. Entire areas have been razed to the ground, reduced to piles of ruins with streets running through them.
Finished.
They are the epitome of what war can do to a city. Only part of the destruction can be attributed to the war against the Russians. The first major flattening of the city began during the struggle between Najibullah's pro-Soviet government and the Mujahideen of the Afghan resistance, who ended up winning the city. But the 7 Mujahideen factions failed in their efforts at corporate government and spawned a second civil war which was again fought inside Kabul. In 1993, the Pashtun leader Hekmatyar and the Uzbek Dashtun attacked Kabul, which was defended by the Tajiki forces of Rabbani and Massoud. Over the next 2 years, the mobile war front shifted from one part of the city to another. The third struggle was between the Rabbani-Massoud government and the Taliban. A 3-pronged Taliban attack in 1996 won them what was left of Kabul and brought them to power. There's been no attempt at reconstruction, partly because successive Afghan governments have had neither the time nor the will to do anything about it. Meanwhile, the people continue to live in abject poverty. This is a bank in the market. The Taliban regime doesn't print its own money. Banknotes circulating in Afghanistan are printed in the territory of the Northern Alliance of the former government. The money is taken into Pakistan, where the Taliban buy it and smuggle it back into the country. Most people in Kabul use bicycles to get around. It's easy to pick out the Taliban because they ride around in brand new jeeps, which are in stark contrast with the run-down motorcars, Russian-made vehicles and ancient buses of dubious origins that pollute the shattered roads in Kabul. We wait for the Taliban jeep to disappear over the horizon before going to our first appointment with Alberto Cairo, an Italian doctor who runs the only center that makes and applies different prosthetic devices for landmine victims. There are between 150 and 200,000 landmine victims. Do accidents still occur? Yes, they do. The mines are being removed, but it isn't easy. Plastic mines are especially hard to detect, so there's constant danger, and it will be there for many years to come. Where did the mines come from? They come from all over. Italy, America, Russia. Everyone has had a hand in creating these deadly devices. Every day, more or less, 250, 300, 350 people come to the orthopedic center looking for help, or because they need a new prosthesis, or have to have it checked, or just because they need help.
ما دادر ما اصلا از بدخشان هستیم.
I come from Badashan. There was a Russian military post near my house.
اونجا منشان نگی بودن.
I went to stay with a neighbor and stepped on a mine.
رفتیم ما تو یک دنوار داشتیم.
I'm 16 years old. All I've ever known is war. Only war.
جای جنگی عروس است، جنگی طالب است، جنگی دیگه است، جنگی دیگه است.
Molti ragazzini sono stati traumatizzati, perdere una
Lots of small children were traumatized after they lost a leg while playing or taking the sheep out to pasture. That's something you don't erase quickly.
padre di famiglia che prima poteva lavorare e guadagnare il pane per procurare il pane alla
But
propria
adults
famiglia.
too, the father of a family who can't work anymore after he loses a leg and so can no longer support his family.
Essere un padre di famiglia nel vero senso della parola come lo era prima e molti di loro hanno dei grossi problemi.
Many people have had to face serious problems.
Usare la parola
By the time they get here, many of them are at the end of their tether, verging on despair.
della pazzia, perché è disperante una situazione di questo genere. Qui non possiamo far molto, non c'è un vero e proprio trattamento
There's not a lot we can do.
Abbiamo preparato
We
per loro
can't
una specie
offer
di percorso
psychological
di-
treatment,
di guerra,
but we
se vogliamo
can
chiamare
teach
così,
them to
dove la
move
gente-
with the prosthesis under difficult
dove
conditions.
devono imparare a muoversi con la protesi in condizioni un pochino difficili. Quello che facciamo
We
è
give them encouragement and
incoraggiarli,
offer them a peaceful
darli in un
environment.
ambiente sereno il più possibile.
Aside from the
Darloro
prosthesis
una
itself,
protesi,
we help them find a job,
aiutarli a trovare
or
un
we
lavoro,
put them to work right
darloro un
here
lavoro
in the
direttamente,
orthopedic
se
center.
possibile, qui nel centro ortopedico.
If possible, we encourage them to
Incoraggiarli
open a
iniziare
small
delle piccole
business.
attività.
This is as much as we can do because proper psychological treatment is beyond our means.
Psicologico questo non è al di sopra delle nostre possibilità. I fisioterapisti che vedete qua, i signori con questi
The physiotherapists who work here are also mine victims who've had limbs
e
amputated.
non c'è nessuno meglio di loro che possa insegnare agli altri come
There's no one better than them to
utilizzare
teach
loro
other victims how to
sono
use a
passati attraverso
prosthetic
esperienze
device
direttamente. Noi la possiamo
because they've already been through this
loro l'hanno
experience.
provato sulla pelle, quindi si stabilisce tra loro e il paziente un
They establish a relationship with the patient that we never could.
Noi, non handicappati, è possibile stabilire. Questo ragazzino cammina per la prima volta.
This child is walking for the first time. For the first time in his life, he feels what it's like to have a foot.
Perché ha parecchi contratture.
His problems aren't over because he's still very deformed after years of abuse.
È difficile, deve
It's
essere
hard
difficile,
going,
però
but he'll make it
riesce
in the
piano
end.
piano e il momento è bellissimo quando arrivano che
When they come here, these children feel lost because everything is new to them.
sono spaesati, non sanno tutto nuovo, sono
They've been closed up at
chiusi
home,
in casa, magari in un angolo della casa.
relegated to some dark corner,
Escono fuori
but now they can finally emerge.
dal loro angolo buio. Quando lasciano il centro ortopedico, in generale sono tutti orgogliosi di poter uscire andando con le proprie gambe. Ancora più interessante è il ritorno, quando tornano.
When they leave the
per un
center,
controllo,
they're
ogni 2
proud
mesi
to be
devono
able
venire
to
per un
walk on their
controllo.
own legs, and when they come back for a checkup, it's like they were returning home.
Tutta una festa di saluti, abbracci, come va, come non va. Goed, je hoort griefti. Goed, shoot. Bibine. Nee, sai, sta, alle felanito, sta, mesha. Questo è la falegnameria dove facciamo
This is the carpentry shop where we make the feet. We make them out of local materials with wood we find at the bazaar, which costs little and is of good quality. It's modeled by hand until we obtain the exact shape of the foot, which can even bend because we use a piece of rubber in the front.
Una flessione grazie a questa gomma che abbiamo messo sulla
The rubber is recycled from the tires of Russian vehicles
dai pneumatici dei carri russi.
and, sad to say, is of excellent quality.
Il piede finito è questo, quindi offre la possibilità di avere una specie
This is the finished foot with built-in shock absorption and flexibility, thanks to the rubber
e
addition.
la possibilità di avere una flessione del piede quando la persona cammina. In questa falegnameria facciamo anche le stampelle.
We also make crutches of different sizes in this carpentry shop out of low-cost local wood.
Bambini, per quelle piccoline, quelle più grandi per gli adulti. Anche qui legno
Of course,
locale, quindi
everything is free of charge.
costo ridotto.
Often these people are so poor, you have to give them something rather than ask something from them.
Dovremmo dare loro qualcosa anziché chiedere loro qualcosa.
We request and, after several attempts, obtain an interview with the Foreign Ministry, the only one authorized by Mullah Omar to make on-camera comments. The interview takes place in an empty room where we're forbidden to use electricity and have to rely on the small flashlight on the camera. Mr. Mutawakil, coming from Jalalabad, we saw a lot of poppy fields. According to the United Nations, Afghanistan is the main opium producer in the world. What is your government doing about this? We are trying to contain poppy cultivation, and we've been successful up to a point. It's not something new. It's something that's been going on for decades in Afghanistan. We're against it. We're trying to contain this phenomenon. But to do better, we need more help from the international community. Mr. Mutawakil, in the West, there's great concern over the conditions of Afghan women. Are you ready to change something in this respect? The West shouldn't ask us to change, but should try to have a better understanding of Afghanistan and understand that our culture and traditions are different. Maybe all this is new for you, but it's not new for the Afghan people. These are our traditions. Can you clarify one point regarding women's education? Is education forbidden, or is it a question of segregation? We've never said that we don't want education for women, but separate. It doesn't mean that we forbid women from going to schools. Whether or not the West tells us to send women to schools, we will send them, because we are ordered by Islam to educate women. News of this kind has been exaggerated in the West, which tells lies about Afghanistan. What is your relationship with Saudi Arabia like? Since the Bin Laden issue, our relationship with Saudi Arabia has deteriorated. The West is asking you to compromise. There's the problem of Osama bin Laden, who lives in Afghanistan and is wanted by the United States. Are you ready to compromise on this? They don't want a compromise. They don't want to use reason. They speak the language of force. Which countries are supporting you? We enjoy total support from Pakistan. This is not interference, but simply help for the Afghan people. Are you ready to compromise with the Northern Alliance to put an end to the war? We already have a government chosen by the Afghan people. We're not ready to recognize anybody else's right to run the country. Poverty and destruction are everywhere. What is your government doing to improve the conditions of the Afghan people? As you know, Afghanistan has been destroyed not by us, but by the war that's been raging for the last 20 years. We let the people rebuild the country. We've created conditions to enable everybody to get back to work. We would like to visit Bamyan in the next few days. Faisal will be your contact person.
फैसल से।
During the next 2 days, we try to make contact with Faisal at the Foreign Office. We come and go without success. On day 3, Faisal gives us a signed permission from the minister and assigns us a new interpreter who's a faithful Taliban. Trucks travel up and down the road that takes us to the Buddhas of Bamiyan. There are no alternative routes for fear of the mines. Rusting armored vehicles lying by the roadside are reminders of how long the war has been raging. A war that, in this part of Hindu Kush, has never ceased. The Hazara of Hez-i-Wadat have never surrendered. Two giant statues of the Buddha, 55 and 35 meters high, tower over the Bamiyan Valley. They were carved in the rock wall by Buddhist monks who started building the statues and the monasteries in Bamiyan in the 2nd and 3rd centuries AD. Gandhara in northwest Pakistan, which is the Peshawar of today, was the center of Buddhist civilization. For centuries, this has been a land of transit and conquest for the Greek armies of Alexander the Great, for the Indian, Persian and Turkish dynasties, and for the hordes of Genghis Khan and Timur. The ancient Buddhist art of Afghanistan, named after its center, Gandhara, is a mixture of Greek, Indian and Central Asian features. Those at Bamiyan are the first Buddha statues to be built in the world. The 35-meter-high Buddha was the first to be created at the end of the 2nd century AD. The image, carved into the rock wall, was covered with a mixture of mud and wet straw. The Buddha wore a blue cloth. Archaeologists found that the neck, arms and face of the Buddha were colored with a yellow paint. The 55-meter-high large Buddha had also been carved into the wall. In its case, the clothes had been added to the statue a little later and were supported by wooden trunks fixed into the rock. The whole niche was covered with paintings from the 3rd and 6th centuries. What remains of them can still be clearly seen. In the enormous rock all around the Buddhas, the monks carved hundreds of caves to live in. For centuries, pilgrims and later on Western tourists came from all over the world to catch a glimpse of the Bamiyan Buddhas. One of them was the Chinese pilgrim, Sun Xiang, who in 632 AD described the Bamiyan Valley in the following words. I arrived from the southeast, on the mountains of the eternal snow. The valleys are deep and the peaks are dangerous. Here the mind is very powerful, the snow very high and the temperatures freezing all through the summer. At 2,500 meters, the Bamiyan Valley is the heart of Hazarajat, the land of the Hazara, an ethnic group whose origins have been traced to Mongolia. According to some historians, the Mongol conqueror Genghis Khan left 1,000 of his soldiers in the newly conquered territories. Hazara, in fact, means 1,000. The people of the Bamiyan Valley are the offspring of the soldiers of Genghis Khan and seem to be waiting for their ruthless ruler to return. Hazars, who are Shia Muslims and supported by Iran, are staunchly opposed to the Taliban, who are ethnic Pashtun and Sunni Muslim. The battle for Bamiyan was ruthless. The valley was first conquered by the Taliban, then taken back by the Hazara, and finally recaptured by the Islamic students. The Buddhas, however, paid a heavy price during the battle. The faces of the statues, already damaged by Muslim conquerors of past centuries, were broken and burned in the fire lit by the militiamen to keep themselves warm, or perhaps as a slight and an insult. On April 23, 1997, the Taliban commander Abdul Wahid declared, "These statues are not Islamic, and we will destroy them." After the destruction of the Buddhas, Iranian director of the film Kandahar, Mohsen Makmalbaf, wrote, "The only one whose heart had not yet turned to stone was the Buddha statue of Bamiyan. With all his grandeur, he felt humiliated by the enormity of this tragedy and broke down. Buddha's state of needlessness and calmness became ashamed before a nation in need of bread. Buddha shattered to inform the world of all this poverty, ignorance, oppression, and mortality. But negligent humanity heard only about the demolition of the Buddha statue. I reached the conclusion that the statue of Buddha was not demolished by anybody. It fell down out of shame. Out of shame for the world's ignorance towards Afghanistan." Kabul, November 1996, decrees announced and later viciously applied by the General Presidency of Amir bin Maruf and Nayas Munkar, the religious police, when the Taliban took over Afghanistan. Women, you shall not step outside your homes. If you go outside, you shall not be like women before the coming of Islam, who went out and appeared before all kinds of men wearing fashionable clothes and makeup. Islam, as a religion of salvation, has determined a specific dignity for women. Islam has valuable instructions for women. They shall not create opportunities to attract the attention of idle people who will look upon them with an evil eye. In case women are required to go outside their place of residence for purposes of education, social requirements, or services, they shall cover themselves in accordance with the regulations of the Islamic Sharia. If women go outside and display themselves in fashionable, ornamental, and provocative clothes, they will be cursed by the Islamic Sharia and shall never expect to go to heaven. All family elders and all Muslims have a responsibility in this respect. We request all family elders to keep a tight control and avoid these social problems. Otherwise, these women and their family elders will be threatened, investigated, and severely punished by the members of the religious police. Drivers are not allowed to pick up women wearing the Iranian veil. In case of violations, the driver will be imprisoned. If such women are spotted on the streets, their houses will be searched and their husbands punished. Drivers shall not transport women using provocative and fashionable clothes. To prevent idolatry, the display of pictures or portraits in vehicles, shops, hotels, rooms, and any other place shall be abolished. Monitors shall tear up all pictures in the above places. To prevent the washing of clothes by young ladies along the water streams in the city, ladies found violating this law shall be picked up in a respectful Islamic manner, taken back to their homes, and their husbands severely punished. Prayers shall be recited at the time in all districts. Movement of all kind shall be strictly prohibited, and everyone is obliged to go to the mosque. If young people are seen in shops, they will be immediately imprisoned. To prevent British and American hairstyles, people with long hair shall be arrested and taken to the Department of the Religious Police to have their hair shaven off. The criminal must then pay the barber. To prevent tailors from sewing ladies' clothes and taking body measurements, if either women or fashion magazines are seen in the tailor's shop, he will be imprisoned. To prevent gambling, in collaboration with the security police, the main centers shall be located and gamblers imprisoned for 1 month. To prevent kite flying, the kite shops in the city shall be abolished. To be broadcast by the public information services, in shops, hotels, vehicles, and rickshaws, music cassettes and music is prohibited. If any music cassette is found in a shop, the shopkeeper shall be imprisoned and the shop closed down. If a cassette is found in a vehicle, the vehicle and the driver will be imprisoned. To prevent beard shaving and cutting, after 1.5 months, if anyone is noticed to have shaven and or to have cut his beard, he shall be arrested and imprisoned until his beard gets bushy. To prevent the keeping of pigeons and birds for sport, within 10 days this pastime shall stop. After that, this activity shall be monitored and the pigeons and other birds killed. To prevent music and dancing at wedding parties. In case of any violation of this law, the head of the family will be arrested and punished. Back in Pakistan, we obtained an interview with Pashtun General Nazirullah Babar, former Interior Minister of the Benazir Bhutto government, and known as the man who helped the Taliban conquer the country. Some have described you as the father of the Taliban.
You see, it must be quite a brute to sire if I were the father. It is so coincidental that, in 1994, when we came into government in 1993, everyone used to talk about our interest with the Central Asian republics, about trade, about oil, about communications and other things. So we did carry out a study and we found that economically there could be a very happy relationship between the South Asian subcontinent, that is Pakistan and India, and on the other side the Central Asian republics. So we thought that if we can make up these, open up these routes and things for them to the south, then there had been an integrated economy. Now the other aspect that we saw to it was that if these pipelines did come into Pakistan, then that would be a boon for all of us. There's a total distance to the sea. Whether it is at Gwadar or Karachi, the total distance from Torgundi is 1600 kilometers. So we thought that now was the time when the West, particularly the United States and Europe, should play a big hand in rehabilitation and development of reconstruction of Afghanistan. And the easiest was from the southwest. So I took a convoy to prove to the world that this area was secure enough for all this work to be done, like the road and the railway and things, because the Afghans had made a lot of sacrifices for the West, for the democratic world. When we came back, we had seen all this that they had no medicine, they required so many other relief goods. So I prepared a convoy of relief goods to go through this region, through this area. And here, when about 6 vehicles were for Kandahar, another 6 were for Lashkargah, then another 6 for Shindand and similarly for Herat, and then some for Turkmenistan and some for Uzbekistan. When they reached Kandahar, regrettably the Indo-Iranian lobby did not like this, because Iran also would never like this route to be opened. And to release that convoy, a body sort of got up, because they knew that we meant well, and if this thing succeeded, we would be able to open up all this and bring about sort of rehabilitation, reconstruction of Afghanistan. So this element got up and released my convoy. And that was the beginning of the Taliban movement. And since they brought peace wherever they went, it appealed to the people's mind, because when we went, at every 2 miles or 5 miles, there was a barrier and people wanting toll. Any commander who had a couple of tanks and some people, he had put a barrier on the road and he wanted toll. So we have to have a system in Afghanistan which ensures the integrity and the unity of Afghanistan and gives everyone his due rights. And that has been our sort of objective, whether it was in the 70s or whether it was in the 90s or it was in the 80s, the unity and integrity of Afghanistan and a broad-based government as such. And that is why, as I was telling you, when the Taliban entered in September 1996 into Kabul, we were there